All right, guys, strength and pause. So we continue. Thomas Schaff, Amer- America's Hope. Chapter 5. United States Notes versus Federal Reserve Notes. If the government runs a deficit and needs money, cash is printed in either United States notes, cash, or Federal Reserve notes, cash. The bank or government pays the cost of paper, ink, and printing. If the government prints United States notes, it spends the cash and there is no debt or interest to pay. For every dollar printed, there is one less dollar of tax and one less dollar of debt. If you want this cash, you must work to earn it. No one gets a free ride by acting like a counterfeiter. Everyone has equal protection and no one receives a lien on your home for free. A dollar bill, cash, has value and people accept it as money regardless of whether it is a United States note or a Federal Reserve note. The bankers believe that cash or checkbook money has no value unless the bank receives a government bond for free, and the bond gives value to the newly issued cash to match the newly issued bond. The bankers believe that the bank should receive government bonds for free and then print cash to match the amount of the government bonds, giving the cash back to the government as a loan. Bankers believe the bonds give the cash value. The banker's argument is flawed because if the value of the cash is based on the value of the bonds, then the bank is claiming the cash has no value in itself, and therefore, if the bank loaned the cash to the government, the cash has no value. The bank loaned nothing of value to the government to obtain the bonds. The Federal Reserve note is a bank IOU that the bank has not paid. Imagine loaning someone an IOU you refuse to pay and having them give you back a government bond. The government bond gives your IOU value. You keep the bond and receive interest and you still never pay your IOU. If the taxpayers make the bond good, the taxpayers can make a dollar bill, cash called United States notes good. The difference is that the banks do not receive interest for free. Simply stated, if the government needs money, they can print United States notes, bills, and use the cash to pay the government payroll or expenditures. There is no loan, so there is no interest. If we use Federal Reserve notes, the cash is printed and given to the banks for the cost of printing. Then the bank loans the cash back to the government. The government gives the bank government bonds, paying the bank interest. If we stop giving the cash to the bank to be returned back as a loan, the taxpayers save the principal and interest the banks receive for free. Using Federal Reserve notes is a legal way to take from the taxpayers and give to the bankers. Then the bankers use part of the money to get lawmakers, judges, and police elected to support them. The government leaders and bankers win at the expense of the taxpayers. The late Thomas Edison explained the matter of issuing currency this way. If our nation can issue a dollar bond interest bearing, it can issue a dollar bill interest free. The element that makes the bond good makes a bill good also. The difference between the bond and the bill is that the bond lets money brokers collect twice the amount of the bond and an additional 20%, whereas the currency pays nobody but those who contribute directly in some useful way. It is absurd to say that our country can issue 30 million in bonds and not 30 million in currency. Both are promises to pay, but one promise fattens the usurers, interest collectors, and the other helps the people. See bibliography number 12 on page 46. The next time someone claims we should use Federal Reserve notes instead of United States notes, ask them if they've read Thomas Edison's quote. The bankers just receive the, the assets of the nation for free and force us to pay the interest on the assets. Is it unfair? The bankers will say it is legal and authorized by lawmakers. Many bankers simply think this is just good business. The bankers have one major problem. The contract or bank loan agreement has a major flaw and does not allow this. The lawmakers, judges, and police have a contract problem also. Their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution is a contract with the American people. Without us knowing it or agreeing to this, in the bank loan agreement, the bankers have implemented the medieval feudal system wherein the nobles own the land and rent it to the serfs. Economically, this is the situation we have in America. Every time a house or car sells and people go to the bank to finance the purchase, the bank receives the lien and promissory note for free, forcing us to pay the interest or rent. And if we refuse, they foreclose, kick us off the property, and find a new tenant, borrower, whether they create money to buy the land and rent it back to us, or create money to obtain the promissory note and charge interest, the rent and the interest is the same. This feudal system was a class system our founding fathers abhorred. In it, nobles were above the law. Today, in court, it seems the bankers are above the law. Do you know of a banker who has gone to jail for violating the U.S. Constitution or bank loan agreement? The medieval feudal system denies equal protection under the law, as does today's American banking system. The courts, lawmakers, and police have enforced this medieval feudal banking system, denying us equal protection under the law. The banks have demanded the serfs give up 1/3 to 1/2 of their payroll check to them, paying all the interest forced upon us. Why should we allow the banks to conceal the whole truth about the real bank loan agreement, allowing the economic effect of theft and counterfeiting to continue? It continues because Americans believe the big lie. Once Americans educate their other fellow Americans, we will repeat history and change the banking system. I'm going to read that again. Once Americans educate their other fellow Americans, we will not repeat history and change the banking system. Outraged Americans will demand the government create interest-free United States notes and that this cash be the only money allowed in circulation. If you want money, you must earn it and not create it like banks do today. If money is loaned, the bank must loan other depositors money and not create it. Today, Congress and the President are too fearful to change the laws and follow Lincoln's example, and they will continue to be until we organize and send out enough brochures to enough Americans so that the population will support the change and make it safe for lawmakers to follow their oath of office to uphold the U.S. Constitution. The lawmakers, political candidates, and judges are waiting on you to do your job to spread the word and get the truth out. We must show that the media is biased and supports the medieval feudal banking system of nobles and serfs. Greed and the love of money run the bankers, government leaders, and the media. To correct the problem, we need you to join us in distributing brochures and cassette tapes. If we have 25 hairdressers in every state joining us, and if they convert 100 clients each, we will have 2,525 people wishing to follow Lincoln. Wives could stop working and maintain the same standard of living. If these 2,525 converted one more person each, we would have 5,050 people talking. 252,500 in all 50 states. If the average person passed out 100 brochures, one in every four voters would want to follow Lincoln. Soon the whole country will follow. You and your group of friends could get 25 people in your state interested and watch American history repeat itself by changing the banking system once again. Senator Bob Dole's book, Trusting the People, page 8, explains that in 1995, the government paid over $230 billion on the national debt. This is nearly 40% of every dollar the federal government collects. The $230 billion in interest and the 40% of taxes going to the bankers for free will be a part of the past and never be repeated in American history. People will again remember the reason we fought the Revolutionary War. In my next book, I will explain how judges, police officials, and lawmakers can double their money every 6 to 8 months without risking 1 cent. You cannot rely on the courts to give you justice if the judges and police are quietly doubling their money every 6 to 8 months. Why would politicians vote to end doubling their wealth? Once you learn how easily it can be done, you may decide to join them. But for those with a conscience, I will illustrate a way to use the same method to help restore this country's economic stability and security. If you were a policeman or judge enjoying the benefits of a feudal noble, doubling your wealth at the expense of the others, you would not stop until the nation was outraged. It is clearly up to the voters to change the system. President Kennedy issued United States notes just before he was assassinated. I owned one of the Kennedy dollars called a silver certificate. This cash was issued interest-free. Within a few months, he was assassinated. If President Kennedy had lived and continued, today the national budget could be balanced, your personal IRS tax eliminated, your home, car, or farm could be debt-free, and you could be living in prosperity. The 3 to 6 months of labor the banks receive for free from you today could be all yours to spend. Today, they spend it. But if Kennedy had lived, the money would be yours. Trillions and trillions of dollars that the banks have today would be in the hands of the American citizens if Kennedy had lived and continued printing his United States notes. Immediately after he died, President Johnson withdrew the Kennedy dollar and issued Federal Reserve notes in their place. Who benefited most by Kennedy's death? One death and trillions of dollars were kept in the hands of the bankers, with nearly half your labor being given to the bankers for free in the medieval feudal banking system. Just one bullet shifted the wealth of every American. The people may not know, but bankers surely know the difference between the United States notes and the Federal Reserve notes. I believe President Kennedy would have lived if he had first exposed the banking scheme on TV and then issued United States notes. Media control is essential to keeping the money system secret, essential to deceiving the nation and making every American a serf instead of the free American our founding fathers intended. Now we need to act like we are free and tell the world the whole truth. End the debt slavery and become free once again. Chapter 6. Former FDIC bank auditor tells all. FDIC stands for Federal Depository Insurance Corporation or Company. True story. When I lived in Illinois, I was asked to fly to Arizona to meet with a former FDIC bank auditor who had decided to join us in exposing the banks. We met for several hours in a library. Being accountants, we use the accounting language such as debits, credits, liabilities, and assets. I will translate the conversation into layman's terms so you can understand what the bank loan agreement release is. I began the meeting by reading and paraphrasing the bank publication Modern Money Mechanics, page 3. It was discussing goldsmiths. People deposited gold coins in exchange for gold receipts. The banks would redeem the gold receipts for gold coins upon request. Depositors began using the gold receipts as money instead of the gold coins. When people asked the banks for loans, the banks simply created new gold receipts and loaned the new gold receipts as money to obtain the borrower's promissory notes. In this manner, the banks obtained the liens on the nation's assets for the cost of printing new gold receipts. Gold receipts are really banknotes. The publication went on to explain how transaction deposits are the modern counterpart of banknotes, gold receipts. It was a small step from printing notes to making book entries crediting the deposits of borrowers, which the borrowers could in turn spend by writing checks. I asked the bank auditor if we replace the word gold with cash and gold deposit receipt with checkbook money, would this describe American banking today? Does that gold deposit receipt represent a check or bank promissory note? Yes. Did the bank define the word money by calling the gold receipt money, just as they call a checking account balance checkbook money? He said yes, and that it is not going to change until the people realize what is happening. You went to the bank for a loan of gold coins. The bank created 100,000 of new gold deposit receipts and loaned you a slip of paper owing you 100,000 in gold coins without the gold coins on deposit to make the gold deposit slip valid. The deposit slip was a fake. There was no money behind it. It is like counterfeit money. Who would agree to being loaned a slip of paper? You owe the bank 100,000 in gold coins and the bank has given you a piece of paper without the money to back it. If the bank paid you the gold it owed you and you paid the bank the gold you owed it, both debts would be cancelled. Key lesson: if the bank paid their debt, you would be out of debt. Instead, they tell you to use the gold deposit receipt as money. The 100,000 promissory notes the borrower signed can be sold for 100,000 in gold coins, and this is why the promissory notes are called the banker's gold. The bank loaned a piece of paper with no gold behind it. The borrower was tricked. The borrower must work to earn 100,000 in gold coins plus interest to repay the bank. Today, the promissory note can be sold for 100,000 in cash, so the investor can receive interest. The borrower's labor to repay the loan is worth 100,000 in cash today. Key lesson: your labor is equivalent to money. Your labor is your property. I'll read that again. Your labor is equivalent to money. Your labor is your property. I'll read it one more time. Your labor is equivalent to money. Your labor is your property. A 100,000 promissory note has the equivalent value of 100,000 legal tender because it can be sold for that amount. The bank loaned nothing of value. If merchants were told the truth, they would not accept this deposit slip without value. It is like writing a check without first depositing money. All the bank did was take something of value, the promissory note or the borrower's future labor, sell it for 100,000 in gold coins or cash, and loan it back to the borrower. The bank gained 100,000 in gold coins and loaned nothing. The gold deposit slip people used as money is no different than our checkbook money. Checkbook money is a bank liability owing cash. Few people use cash. They use checks, credit cards, links cards. Key lesson: the bank did not loan 1 cent of legal tender to obtain your 100,000 promissory note. The bank received 100,000 from you and acted like a counterfeiter, loaning you the newly printed money, checkbook money. The deposit slip represents a checking account balance, which is a scorecard of how much cash the bank owes us. Instead of handing the merchant a deposit slip, we hand the merchant a check, which transfers the bank liability from our checking account to the merchant's checking account. When we used gold deposit slips, the bank owed us money, just as with a checking account balance today. If we gave the merchant deposit slips, the bank would no longer owe us the money. They would owe the merchant the money. We can no longer spend that money. Now the merchant can spend it. Key lesson: a bank liability, a deposit slip, a debt, an IOU, checkbook money, a check, a casino token, a promissory note, or a banknote are all the opposite of money. They are worthless without an asset to redeem them. A bank liability is merely a bank scorecard showing how much legal tender the bank owes customers. A check is not money. If you write $1 million check without first depositing the $1 million, you go to jail. A check merely transfers a bank liability from one checking account to another with the assumption that there is a bank asset, cash, to exchange it for. If you deposit cash, the bank uses the cash to buy government bonds that can be sold for cash, making your check valid. So what if the bank stole your car or promissory note, sold it for government bonds, and used the government bonds to fund the bank loan check? The check would be valid. The seller of the house received a check. He does not care if other depositors funded the check or if the borrower funded the check. Key lesson: according to the agreement, was the bank to loan you money to obtain the promissory note, or was the bank to deposit the promissory note and return it back to you as a loan? It would be different if the people used only gold coins to buy merchandise. If the bank can trick you into using casino tokens or checkbook money or deposit slips in place of real gold coins, you do not know if the value to back up the tokens came from you or other depositors. If we only use cash or gold coins and the banks could not create money, then we would know for sure we were being loaned other depositors' money. Would it matter whether the borrower funded the bank loan check or whether other depositors funded the check? If the borrower deposited his 100,000 earned by his labor into a checking account and was forced to withdraw it as a loan, he would have lost 100,000 and had a 100,000 debt. If he does not pay this debt, the bank forecloses. If this continued, the non-bankers would have huge debts and all their wealth would be transferred to the bankers. I proceeded to explain the bank bookkeeping entries and asked the bank auditor to stop me if I was wrong. If Tim deposits 100 in his checking account, the bank records the cash as a bank asset and records a 100 bank liability. The 100 liability is like a bank scorecard saying the bank owes Tim 100. The deposit is like Tim loaning the bank 100 as proven by the 100 liability. Because Tim loaned the bank 100, Tim can receive back the 100 in the form of either cash or by writing a check to a merchant. Key lesson: if you deposit money at the bank, it is like loaning the bank the money. You have a right to receive your money back. Key lesson: the promissory note has value because it has interest and collateral, a lien. Without interest or collateral, few people would buy it. If Tim loaned the bank 5,000 in diamonds, the diamonds would be recorded as a bank asset, and a new bank liability of 5,000 would be recorded. If Tim did not want the diamonds back, and it was agreed that the bank would repay the loan by giving Tim a 5,000 check, the loan from Tim to the bank would be paid in full. The bank exchanged the 5,000 in diamonds for a 5,000 check, just like the bank exchanged the borrower's promissory note for a check. Tim had to earn 5,000 to buy the diamonds, just as he must earn the money to repay the loan. He earned the money, so he has the right to spend the money. If the bank stole what Tim earned and deposited the money, returning it to him as a loan, it would be an injustice to Tim. Key lesson: an exchange is the same as a deposit. The bookkeeping entries are the same. Receiving 5,000 in diamonds from a borrower, selling it for cash, and returning the cash back to the borrower as a loan is a fraudulent conversion of the diamonds. Taking our previous example, the bank records the 100,000 promissory note as a bank asset, creating a new 100,000 bank liability called checkbook money. This is really an unauthorized loan from the borrower to the bank. The bank returns the loan back to the borrower by issuing a check for 100,000. The check merely transfers the liability from one checking account to another. Bank loan agreements do not disclose the unauthorized loan from the borrower to the bank. Example: a bank advertises that it loans money. You apply for a 100,000 loan. The bank gives you a 100,000 check. What really happened? The bank implied that they loaned you 100,000. The truth is that the bank recorded a loan from you. The bank owes you the 100,000 they agreed they would loan you as required to legally own your promissory note. The bank paid you 100,000, they still owe you 100,000 more for the deposit, the unauthorized loan to the bank. The auditor agreed that this is true, according to the bank bookkeeping. The bank loan checks need cash or an asset promissory note that can be sold for cash to make the check legal. The Federal Reserve Bank publications admit that the bank never loaned 1 cent of legal tender or other depositors' money. The Fed publications admit that the bank used the promissory note to fund the bank check, stealing the promissory note or recording the promissory note as a loan from the borrower and then using it to fund the check is essentially the same. Bank assets and liabilities both increase whether it was loaned to the bank or stolen. Whether it was stolen or not, most people want their property back. Stealing and refusing to pay a loan is essentially the same thing. I asked the former bank auditor to tell me if I was wrong. He said I was correct. About 100 years ago, Rothschild claimed the non-bankers would never learn the secret. He claimed the simple people were too stupid to learn how the bankers stole everything. The oldest bank trick is this simple. People think they can only deposit cash or checks into a checking account. The checking account balance acts like a substitute for the real money or cash deposited. It is like exchanging cash for a casino token and using the token as money. The trick is to get people to use the token as money or checks and checking account balances as money instead of cash. The next trick is that a bank can deposit anything into a checking account as long as it can be sold for cash. For example, If I stole cars or diamonds and the bank cooperated and allowed me to deposit the stolen property, it would be like depositing cash as long as the stolen property can quickly be sold for cash. If one deposits cash, the bank sells the cash to buy government bonds that pay the bank interest. In hours, the bank can sell the bonds for cash, making the bonds the equivalent of cash. If one deposits stolen cars or diamonds and the bank exchanges the stolen property for government bonds, it is like depositing cash. The bank knows it is easier to sell promissory notes than stolen cars or diamonds. One telephone call and the promissory notes are sold for government bonds. It is done every day. It is like depositing government bonds, cash to issue a check. The oldest bank trick in the world is to make you think you received a loan which you are then willing to repay. You got an alleged bank loan check with cash behind it. The question is, where did the cash come from? The bank auditor replied, I think you finally understand. Key lesson. The bank does not own the promissory note until the bank fulfills the agreement and gives you consideration, money in accordance to the agreement. Depositing funds and stealing the deposit is called a fraudulent conversion. It is a felony. The key question is, did the borrower agree in writing to be the depositor and fund the bank loan check? Chapter 7. Actual cash value. Actual cash value means the cash price you can sell an item for in the ordinary course of business without being forced to sell it. When you apply for a 100,000 bank loan, you sign a 100,000 promissory note. The note funds the 100,000 bank loan check back to you. What is the actual cash value of the promissory note? Is it 100,000 because the bank sells it at the end of the day for 100,000 in government bonds, which has value equal to cash? What is the actual cash value of the new bank loan check? It is 100,000 because you can receive 100,000 cash. They merely exchange actual cash value for actual cash value and charged you as if there was a loan. Some of you may want proof. Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco publication, Monetary Policy in the United States, page 13 states that bank loans is funded by banks creating new deposits. They claim there was a loan. The truth is, it was an exchange and they called the exchange a loan. The proof is in the bookkeeping entries. No actual cash value was loaned as consideration to obtain the promissory note and the proof that the note funded the check. And the proof is that the note funded the check. The proof that the note funded the check is the new money, the new deposit, as the FED publication so clearly admit. If you gave the bank 100 cash as collateral for a bank loan and the bank loaned you nothing but deposited the 100 cash and used it to fund a bank loan check, refusing to return the 100 cash collateral, would you be mad? That is exactly what the bank did to you. When you handed the promissory note to the bank, it has equal value to the bank loan check. After the loan is repaid, the promissory note has no value because the loan payments stopped. When they return the note, it has no value, which is the same as refusing to return the 100 cash collateral. If we follow the Constitution and only use the gold and silver as lawful money, the bank could never use your promissory note to fund a bank loan check. The bank would be forced to use other depositors' money to fund the check, giving you equal protection under the law. This is why the bankers hate the Constitution, gold and silver money, and equal protection. Next time the media claims a group of anti-government, next time the media claims a group is anti-government, I bet that group believes in the Constitution and in gold and silver. You are receiving the training of a bank expert witness. Volume 2 will significantly increase your skills. Volume 1 is the basics to get everyone up to the same level. Volume 2 is the banker's nightmare. The banks know they cannot answer the following questions without exposing everything. Ask the banker to give his personal opinion on the following questions. If the bank demands I place 10,000 cash as security with the bank to receive a 10,000 loan, and the bank deposits the 10,000 into a checking account, did the bank loan anything so far? No. If the bank deposits the 10,000 to issue a 10,000 check from the deposit and returns a 10,000 check to me, did the bank loan me anything? No. Did the promissory note or lien act like security for the alleged loan? Yes. If I deposit 10,000 cash into a checking account, does the checking account balance increase by 10,000? Yes. Does the 10,000 cash deposited and the new checking account balance of 10,000 mean there is now 20,000 of money that can be spent? No. The 10,000 cash is exchanged for new money called checkbook money. You may spend the checkbook money by using a check, or you may exchange the checkbook money back into cash. We ask the question to prevent the bank from claiming they can create checkbook money without first depositing an asset, money, having equal value to the new checkbook money created. Checkbook money has equal value to legal tender. Cash, just like a promissory note, has equal value to cash because you can sell it for cash. Depositing cash, a check, or a promissory note or lien security merely means that one exchanged the value of the funds deposited for equal value of checkbook money. An exchange of equal value is not a loan. Mr. Banker, please answer the following questions. If one deposits 10,000 promissory note or lien, does the checking account balance increase by 10,000? Yes. Does the new 10,000 checking account balance act like new 10,000 of currency one can spend? Yes. If the bank deposits a 10,000 promissory note, does the bank receive the promissory note for free and create 10,000 of new money in the same transaction? Yes. Does this have an economic effect similar to stealing the 10,000 promissory note or future wages and counterfeiting rolled into one transaction? Yes. What right does the bank have to take 10,000 of actual cash value from a customer, deposit it and withdraw the money, and the bank keep the 10,000 as bank's property without the customer's knowledge, authorization, or permission? None. The book will prove this is the situation on using the Federal Reserve Bank publications. Do you see why the bankers and government leaders fear this book? If this book got into enough Americans' hands, the leaders would be forced to follow the Constitution and great American presidents like Lincoln, setting all Americans free of bank loans. The average American wife would have the option to stop working, stay home, and have the same standard of living produced with both husband and wife working today. If you keep giving your 10,000 worth of future wages to the bankers for free and they return it back to you as a loan, both spouses must work to support the banking welfare. Chapter 8. Intent of Agreement. One of the requirements to become a certified public accountant is to take a business law course. The course I took in college taught that a loan contract has the following essential elements. 1. An agreement with mutual understanding. 2. Competent parties. 3. based on the approval willingness of both parties. 4. Supported by consideration, money. The lender has to give up money to the borrower. 5. Made for a lawful purpose. 6. In legal form. An agreement must have full disclosure of material facts. Do I loan you my money, or do you give me your money for free and I return it back to you as a loan? It is material who provided the money loaned. The course taught that an offer expresses the intent and willingness of the one making the offer to do or not do certain things. The three requirements of an offer are contractual intention, the state of mind as to where the money is coming from to make the loan, in brackets. 2. Definiteness, open brackets, known positively for certain, sure, close brackets. 3. Communication of the offer to the other party. If an offer is vague or indefinite, or if essential provisions are lacking, there is no offer or acceptance or agreement. For an agreement to be valid, there must be mutual understanding. Independent certified public accountants audit banks, acting like police to protect the public. The CPA must follow audit guidelines. These guidelines require the CPA to know the intent of the borrower's agreement and to be sure the agreement and economic effect of the bank bookkeeping entries are in agreement. As judge and jury, you must decide if the agreement stated loan or implied loan by the words interest, borrower, and lender, and whether the bookkeeping entries show an exchange but charge you as if there was a loan, significantly changing the cost and the risk. The CPA must have the competence to know the difference and must have investigated this requirement in the audit investigation. As the judge and jury, you must make a decision on whether there is a valid agreement or whether there was an intentional breach. The facts are simple. The bank advertised and wrote an agreement implying that they would loan money, credit, or a check to the borrower if he signed an agreement, a promissory note, to repay the loan. The judge and jury will now consider the intent of both parties on a typical 10,000 bank loan. Intent can be stated as simply as whether the bank led the alleged borrower to believe the bank would loan a bank check cash equivalent if the borrower agreed to sign the promissory note to repay the loan. Most borrowers I talked to believe the reason they signed the promissory note was simply to agree to repay the check loan to them. That was the intent of signing it. Only the alleged borrower signed the agreement, so only the alleged borrower's signature is relevant to the intent. The bank had a far different intent in writing the agreement. The bank intended to receive actual cash value of $10,000 for free from the alleged borrower and return the $10,000 back to the borrower as a loan. The law allows the bank to create new tokens, checkbook money called bank liabilities, deposits, and IOUs to match cash or government bonds the bank owns. The bank simply used the promissory note to obtain government bonds for free and used the government bonds to create 10,000 new tokens, new money, as if someone deposited cash. The money simply increased by the amount of the promissory note. The bank exchanged the promissory note having actual cash value of 10,000 for bank tokens, checkbook money having actual cash value of 10,000. The bank received 10,000 for free from the alleged borrower and returned it back to the alleged borrower as a loan. The bank required the alleged borrower to repay the alleged loan in cash or tokens. If the alleged borrower knew the bank loaned nothing of value for the promissory note, they would use their vote to change the system. When we took an opinion poll of the American people and told them the whole truth, they agreed they never had the intent to give the bank 10,000 of actual cash value for free and have it returned back to them as a loan. They had no idea, so they could not have had intent to fund the bank loan check. The borrower believed the tokens loaned were financed by other depositors. The alleged borrowers had no idea they financed their own loan and had to pay back the principal and interest to a third party who never loaned any actual cash value. The bank knew the truth and what their intent was. The bank wrote the agreement, they advertised, and had the intent proven by the bookkeeping entries. They claimed there was a loan when in fact the economics proved that no loan existed, that there was an exchange and a charge as if there was a loan. I believe shows that the bank intended to make false statements, false representations to conceal the exchange in the agreement with the intent to reinforce a false impression, and failed to correct a false impression by showing the true intent in the written agreement and bank advertising. Why did the bank change and conceal the true intent? It obviously changes the cost and risk of the alleged loan. The exchange allows the bank to obtain the assets of the nation for free and to force us to pay them interest on what they receive from us for free. If the banker's intent was not concealed, informed Americans would be outraged and vote out everyone aiding and abetting the bankers. Can we prove the intent of the borrower? Sure we can. What borrower do you know that is stupid enough to agree to give the bank a gift of 10,000 of actual cash value and have the bank immediately return it back to the same person as a loan? Americans are not that stupid. They have to be tricked into it. Can we prove the intent of the bank? Yes, by the bookkeeping entries, the stamp on the back of the promissory note, as will be discussed later, and bank policy. All right, so we're going to stop there. Chapter 9. This book blowing mind as I continue to read. So we're going to stop there, chapter 9. We'll take it up on the next video. Thanks for your time, guys. Remember, strength and powers. Stay up.